Trump supporters imagine that a year into his presidency, he'd be offering his services to literally run Gaza himself.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is why he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, because he is truly the president of peace. And President Trump is somebody who has been delivering peace, or at the very least fighting for peace, all the way, all around the world. And so this is something that we want to see. Nobody wants more forever wars. Nobody wants wars that spiral out of control with American allies that could potentially embroil us into more forever wars in our country and rob us of our treasure inside of our treasury, and also our greatest treasure, which is our American soldiers and our American lives. And so we want to sue for peace in Gaza, in Ukraine, in the Straits of Taiwan, all over the world, and that has been the policy of MAGA, and that policy has been strongly put forward today by the president.
Great to hear from you there, from Benny. I can finally hear you now. That's good stuff. But I mean, when President Trump stood on his America First platform, I mean, bringing in Tony Blair, you know, the globalist, you know, this is a guy that's, you know, the last time he waded into the Middle East, it was on fire for a generation and millions of lives were lost. Is he really Tony Blair really the man to bring peace to Gaza?
Well, globalists started this war, right? Maybe globalists got to end it, all right? Now, you know, you hate to see it, but I don't give a damn if it's John Kerry negotiating the end of the Ukraine and Russia civil war. I could care less. Nobody wants to see it. President Trump ran on being the president of peace. He is delivering on that. And again, there isn't a single American, especially in the MAGA wing of the party, that voted for more forever wars. No one wants that. And obviously a little bit of a scuffle in the Middle East could and does regularly mean forever war for America and for the UK. And so we're done with that. And we're thankful, hopefully, that the first major steps towards peace were taken today. I will remind you, Harry, that the Nobel Peace Prize is awarded in the second week of October every single year. So maybe President Trump is also aiming for that.
I mean, it's definitely, I think, quite high on his agenda. The president of peace strikes again, so to speak. But like, you know, with Putin and Alaska and the Zelensky summit in August, you know, we saw a lot of great sort of mood music come out of the White House and come out of the, you know, sort of global alliance, only for Putin to thumb his nose at President Trump and not come to the table and drag things out. What does your gut say on whether, you know, Hamas, these are not sort of, you know, good faith actors in any sense? What are the odds of them actually coming to the table, or do you think they're filleted and gutted and ready to surrender?
It is fundamentally different than the Putin negotiations, because Vladimir Putin has the upper hand in Ukraine. Hamas does not have the upper hand in Gaza. You can see where the Israeli army is. I mean, they've been decimated. It's over. It's done. There is nothing more than a absolute total war of attrition now ahead for Hamas in Gaza, and they need to lay down their arms and surrender because they've lost. You know, they've lost like something like 90% of the territory in that they've lost full, total, and functional control. And so you're in no position to do anything other than surrender and to sign a peace deal. Effectively, I guess you don't have to surrender. You can sign a peace deal and not be a terror state. And so that again, it's totally inverted. And when it comes to Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, you know, I loved seeing the two of them meet and to begin these conversations. It's going to be a much trickier negotiation, given the fact that Russia does have an upper hand in Ukraine and has taken a lot of territory in Ukraine. But again, still, you're seeing very good signals there that the sides are wanting to come to the table and wanting to move in the positive direction. And of course, the positive direction in both scenarios is peace.
Before we move on, just briefly on Netanyahu in town. Obviously, Israel is a sort of hot topic at the moment amongst the MAGA community, amongst Donald Trump's base. Just talk us through the divisions there and how big is that rift? There's obviously, you know, the Tucker Carlsons of this world, you know, are not fans of Netanyahu and not fans of America's ongoing relationship with Israel. Is it just some very noisy parts of the base that have that view, or is there a split emerging amongst that traditional American support for their ally in the Middle East?
Yeah, I can talk about it with total clarity from two specific points, and these are the division points. One, you're never going to have a perfect ally. There's always going to be problems with the French. There's going to be problems with the UK. There's going to be problems with all of Europe, right? The whole of your allyship you're always going to come in conflict with, and you're going to have major disagreements. Israel is an ally of America in the Middle East, and it's something, obviously, that is going to come with frictions, as it always does with allies, and people wanting, being totally and completely self-interested. There's also an ongoing war going on, and that makes people in the MAGA base very nervous that this might escalate, right, with the bombing of Iran. I mean, this is something that is obviously could potentially spiral out of control, could lead to broader conflict, could lead to more American troops on the ground. And my God, Harry, I've lived through enough of that, right? I'm in my late 30s, and for the vast majority of my life, America has been fighting forever wars. It's hard to really think of a time when America wasn't fighting a forever war. And my brothers were going off, right, in arms, and coming back, well, just to see all the land they fought for surrendered right back to the Taliban, right, along with their boots and their trucks and their guns, and it's like their
Humvees and their Humvees and their helicopters,
exactly,
and billions of pounds of aid. No, I hear you, brother.
And MAGA doesn't want that. And so, again, with Israel, it's fraught because of those things, and it's fraught because of one other thing, which is that America first means America first. It means our nation first. Not Mexico, and not Canada, and not Israel, and not any country in Europe, no other allegiances other than America. And that's something that people obviously want to have as a cornerstone of our movement, that you have no other allegiance other than this nation. And that is, there's a rift there, because obviously I think that there's a lot of people that want to have, a lot of interested parties that want to put, I think, other nations before America.
Yeah.
And in every scenario, that's wrong. And I don't, it's wrong on the level when it comes to Israel. And I think that's what has created this. It's kind of like a flashpoint, but it's also wrong because for the last 4 years, we live without Ukraine. I mean, listen, man, you go through any liberal neighborhood in America and you'll see more Ukrainian flags than you'll see American flags in a lot of these streets. The sort of the height of Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris flying a Ukrainian flag inside of the well of the United States House of Representatives. Like they did that. That should be illegal, actually. And so that, again, it is an affront to what America first actually is, and every other country comes second. And so that is where the schism lines are.
Fascinating. Listen, let's talk while we talk about what could be illegal for people like Nancy Pelosi and Democrats. The James Comey saga seems to be reaching a pretty fascinating conclusion now. Is this revenge, or is this genuine retribution for crime, or both?
Sure. So you can't lie to Congress, and you can't demonstrably lie to Congress, meaning when everyone who has worked with you said that you've been illegally leaking national security information. I mean, again, that's something that should be an affront to your job as the FBI director. The FBI is an intel service for the federal government. You shouldn't be leaking your private notes or your information or information about ops you're running and hoaxes you're running against the president. But he has been caught dead to rights that he lied to the United States Congress. And the reason why there are laws against that is that may well affect policy, that will prove that you can be dishonest when somebody is trying to hold you into account. And James Comey was dishonest. And so he's been charged with 2 felony counts, and he'll have his day in court. But even the strongest James Comey defenders, like Michael Cohen, this is a man who hates President Trump, who loves President Comey, and he was on James Comey's favorite network, MSNBC. He says James Comey will be found guilty here because James Comey is guilty of lying to Congress, leaking sensitive information. And I think that, Harry, this is just going to be one of many trials that James Comey is going to have. There's just the first of many. So, buckle up.
How strong is the case, though? Because they didn't go for a grand jury. Then there's some replacement in personnel in various prosecuting offices, and then the case was come. Is it as watertight as the president will be hoping, or do you think there could be some wriggle room here?
So James Comey went and leaked information and then bragged about it to his friend Daniel Richman, Columbia University professor. And then Daniel Richman was instructed by James Comey to give that to the FBI. And then James Comey was asked about it, and then he said, I didn't do that. But Daniel Richman said he did it under oath, and Andrew McCabe has said he was authorized to leak for James Comey. And so this is going to be a losing battle if you have people actually turning on you, and that's in fact what I hear is happening. That James Comey's deputies and his allies inside of the FBI have flipped, and that they are just simply saying, listen, on this issue, James Comey authorized us to leak, and that's exactly what we did. The amazing thing is that these records all exist. They're all present in the FBI today. They're all in James Comey's own hand and in his own admission. And so I just don't know how you... I just like James Comey should take a plea agreement. Quite frankly.
Do you reckon that's where it ends up? Does he cuts a deal? I mean, also, if this is retribution, it's not quite the style. We saw what happened with Donald Trump. We saw what happened with Donald Trump's allies throughout the Biden term. Lawfare. Is it about sort of bogging him down in legal costs, legal bills, and if he gets found guilty at the end of it for good measure, that's great. I mean, he could have gone a lot harder. We look at Roger Stone and how many cops turned up at Roger Stone's house on exactly the same charges. Comey's being allowed to turn up to a police station at a time of his own choosing. He's not having his doors kicked in. Is this more about just sort of putting a bit of pressure on him rather than actually trying to jail him?
Yeah, we've all watched Game of Thrones, right? We've all seen Arya Stark. Like, we know what actual retribution means. Right? You killed off my family, I'll kill off your family, right? In that saga, this is the way that it goes. And it's very entertaining. There is no retribution here. Retribution would be an eye for an eye, Old Testament style. And so in that case, it would be 35 armed FBI tactical agents, counterterrorism agents, kicking in James Comey's door, walking him out in his underwear or his Borat Speedo, whatever he wears to bed, and frog marching him in front of the world. The cameras, obviously, perhaps your cameras would be there. Maybe my cameras would be there. We'd be live streaming. It'd be the #1 live stream on Earth. And it'd be so much fun, right? They'd tip us off, have a camera ready. Let's go. That would be actual, that would be actual retribution. That would be actual revenge. Revenge would be what they did to Peter Navarro, who's like 80 years old. He's like Trump's financial advisor. They put him in leg irons on a plane. They watched the whole plane watch as Peter Navarro gets put in leg irons at the airport in public. They frog march him through the airport. This small. He's like a small man, and he's like 80 years old, and he's not a threat to anyone, and would clearly have gone peacefully if a law-abiding person if they just asked. And then of course they raided Trump's home with a death. People miss this about the Trump raid. They had a kill order. They had a purposeful use of deadly force order from Merrick Garland, signed off on Merrick Garland. The intention there was to create a blue-on-blue nightmare where Secret Service is like, what are you doing raiding this home with guns? We're going to shoot at you. They shoot back. President Trump's teenage children are living in Mar-a-Lago along with Melania Trump. I mean, the intention there was to actually cause horrible harm to Donald Trump. So that would be revenge. That would be actually revenge. Send a kill order, in to raid Comey's house. But they haven't done that, and they won't do that. They're still better men. And quite frankly, I think that's a good thing. Honestly, you should show that you're different than the animals.
Who do you think's next? Do you think John Brennan, former CIA director, will be wondering whether he's going to hear the crunch of boots on his gravel sometime soon? You've got James Clapper, the head of national intelligence, also in the sights. Is Hillary? Could this go all the way? Where do you think this ends? How far is the White House going to push this?
So what I've heard, Harry, is that the White House is not happy about the Russiagate op that it was run against President Trump. And so if you look at the architects of that op, you do have Brennan and Clapper up there. You have Comey as well. You have Barack Obama, who would certainly apply for and probably get presidential immunity for this. But he's the only one. Joe Biden was the one who was sitting there in the meetings suggesting that they go after General Flynn, and they ended up doing that, right? With the Logan Act. So this is something that you should prepare to see down the pike. Now, this op is a continuation of a conspiracy. So there's actually no statute of limitations that's ticking on it. It's also something that they did. They enforced this op in Florida, in Mar-a-Lago, in that raid. That was a big no-no. It was bad news. The reason why they were able to get this indictment against James Comey is that he was testifying in Virginia from his home during COVID. So they can actually run the grand jury there. They can run a grand jury in Florida. Trump plus 90 county, but that's just the way, it's the way Democrats do it in D.C. And they can get themselves, quite an interesting grand jury there. Now, I don't know if that's running right now, but I'm telling you that the energy inside of the administration is that is a grand conspiracy, a conspiracy against rights of President Trump, and that guys like Brennan and guys like Clapper are going to need to really answer in a court of law for that. And I'll add this, Harry, that John Brennan was on TV just this weekend saying that he's looked at all of his own files and all of his own actions, and he's found himself innocent. So, good for you, man. John Brennan is out saying that he's innocent. So in the world that we've lived in, that probably means he's guilty as hell.
Benny Johnson, thank you for joining us. So stand by for more fireworks is basically what you're saying. Come back and see us soon and keep us updated on all of that. See you soon, Benny. Thank you. After the break, we'll be discussing Keir Starmer's smearing of millions of Brits as racist. What did they do? They dared to question illegal migration. It's reckless, it's insulting, and is he making the same mistakes as the American left? We'll have all of that next. Don't go anywhere. Now, when America leads, Britain often follows. But the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has led his flailing Labour government down the worst possible path. By branding the insurgent Reform Party's immigration plans racist, he smeared millions of British citizens who are terrified of unchecked illegal migration. Sound familiar? Well, for years, Donald Trump supporters were branded Nazis, deplorables, and even trash. And look where that got the Democrats. But in pressing the panic button is Keir Starmer repeating mistakes of Hillary, Biden and Kamala. Joining me to discuss all that is political pollster extraordinaire James Johnson and Mark Kerkeran, Executive Director of the Centre for Immigration Studies. James, call me old-fashioned. Calling 30 to 40% of the electorate who are currently indicating they could back reform in the United Kingdom a bunch of racists seems quite a bold strategy.
Or the 70% of British voters who want to see immigration come down.
Well, there we go.
And so yes, it is difficult. And of course, Labour, if you put that to Labour, they would say, well, actually, look, this is a very particular policy. We don't think people would support it. We think it's this is a specific thing. Voters don't hear that. They just see immigration control. Labour thinks you're racist. So it's difficult. All I would say is that Labour's strategy here, that 70% of voters, they might be more interested in the 30%. Because if Labour want to hold on to power, their best bet might be to get all of the Green voters and Lib Dem voters and Corbyn
a coalition of chaos. A rainbow coalition.
A coalition of lefties.
Yes.
Because those people are very scared of Nigel Farage. And actually, Labour can get back into power on just 30% of the vote. So that may be Starmer's calculation. It may not be as crazy as it sounds.
What do you pick up in the polls in the United Kingdom, though, for our sort of readers around the West? Starmer's obviously incredibly unpopular. Nigel Farage is on the surge. How solid is that Farage surge, or is it a gamble that Labour are taking now that if they start throwing some real punches, they might be able to strip back some of that support?
I think it's very real. I mean, what happened at the local elections last year shows this is not just a polling bump.
Yeah.
Reform were the first party ever, apart from Labour and the Conservatives and the old Liberals of David Lloyd George and Henry Asquith, to win a local elections in the UK. That is remarkable. So it's definitely real. It is difficult, though, being frontrunner, and Farage is going to have to be frontrunner for the next 4 years.
Yes.
And I think the most important thing for him is not to worry about Starmer's attacks, but to worry about attacks from within. Infighting tends to follow Nigel Farage around. If he can keep his party together and look convincing and look like he's got answers on the economy, answers on immigration, answers on the NHS, then he may well he could very much well do it.
Mark, in the United States, Donald Trump seems to turn sort of allegations of being trash or deplorable or racist into a sort of campaigning talking point. But he turned up in a trash truck, did he not? Is there a way that this would backfire generally? Well, it seems it did on Trump. But what would be your advice to anyone branded racist just for purely talking about immigration?
At this point, the accusation has become kind of a joke, really. I mean, it's like calling people fascists, or even like calling somebody a witch or a heretic. I mean, it doesn't.
These words have lost all meaning.
Yeah, they've lost all meaning. Exactly. And what they do is like what you were suggesting. The Prime Minister's rhetoric does is basically say, okay, well, you think we're all deplorables, as Hillary said. So screw you, pardon my language. I mean, this is not a way to get elected. And Trump is basically the 2x4 the public took to the head of the leadership class because they wouldn't respond to this issue that was just sitting there on the ground for any politician to pick up, and they wouldn't do it.
I mean, what voters also want is results as well. You know, Labour have talked a good game on immigration in the United Kingdom, smash the gangs, stop the boats, we're going to do this and that, but still the illegal migrants come. If you were, if you were advising Labour from an American perspective, if we compare to what Donald Trump has done on the southern border, he has basically ground it down to a complete halt. Capture and release is basically at zero now. It's phenomenal how quickly he did that. That can't have all been sort of vibes and rhetoric. What advice would you give for what Keir Starmer and people in Britain can learn from Donald Trump beyond actually just being quite hardcore?
Well, no, Trump followed up the vibes and rhetoric with actual policies, and you have to do that. The vibes matter, they help. The rhetoric helps dissuade people from coming, but you need to have policy to back it up.
Yeah.
And the key thing they did at the border is stop letting people go, because no one's going to spend all that money and take all that risk if they don't get let go into the United States and they're just in detention. So instead of maybe putting people up in hotels, maybe you put them in detention, regular detention, where they can't just go out and do whatever they want, and then return them as quickly as possible.
James, obviously it's a salient political issue. The last election is going to be a salient political issue in the UK going forward. We're here in DC. Every time we get into this conversation, either on air or otherwise, people can say, what is going on in Britain? This is nuts. You're giving them pre-charged debit cards. You're putting them in 4-star hotels. The amount of migrant-related crimes in local communities are driving a wedge down the middle of the country. People are taking to the streets. Not all of them Tommy Robinson supporters or racists, good salt the earth folk have had enough of this. They're spraying roundabouts, they're painting their houses with Union Jacks. The political class seem completely late to the prom on this one, right?
Everything you just said, Harry, might be what Americans say, but you also could have lifted that from a British voter focus group.
Which you do regularly.
Which I do regularly, and the British voters feel like that. They can't get their head around it. They can't get their head around why there's not a common sense approach to this. Now, obviously, the difficulty is that US has a land border, UK has a sea border. It's a bit more difficult. There's a France to contend with.
Yeah, I don't know. I love this debate. Is it harder? I'll get a quick thought from both of you, then we'll go back to James. Is it harder to police an island than an open border?
You wouldn't think, and I used to think that of course it would be easier to have a maritime border, but it's not.
Yeah.
Because you can build a wall. It's hard to get over. You grab people as soon as they come. If people are coming by water, the boat falls apart. What are you going to let them drown?
Leaving them drowning in the channel is not an issue. James, how far do you think the government have fallen on this issue? Will they ever be able to pull these voters back? Have people just given up on them and thought, you guys, look, we're giving you a chance. Tories messed it up. Labour messed it up. Let's spin the wheel.
I mean, on immigration, it's done, I think. I can't see people really trusting Labour on immigration again. I don't think they did when they elected them, to be honest. I think they trusted them on the NHS. I think they thought this is better than Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives, but they weren't exactly going in with high expectations. So look, I think they are in real trouble. Like I say, their best bet now is what Labour's lines are at this conference, which is it's us or Farage. Try and rally the left around them. That is not going to be nice listening for anyone who's in the middle in British politics and wants immigration controls or thinks Nigel Farage is actually a reasonable guy. But for those people who are, more like the Corbynistas that Keir Starmer needs on board, it may well resonate. Just one very quick thing on the racist accusation. That will be particularly baffling to the number of non-white people in the UK who are also angry with immigration.
Yeah, especially illegal immigration. It's because there's a lot of people who, first, second generation, third generation immigrants whose parents came to this country or their grandparents came to the country completely legally and have played by the rules and have assimilated into British society and American society, especially American society actually, and it's actually the unfairness, it's the queue jumping of the illegal migration that is so toxic, right?
Yeah, I mean, you will have seen this in your work. I was in the swing states just before the election last year, and the people who were most angry about levels of illegal immigration were non-white voters who came there themselves and done it the right way.
Which is why you saw a huge shift among black and Hispanic voters. I mean, the blacks were mainly native-born Americans. It's not an immigrant thing. But the shift toward Trump was enormous. I was in some of these counties in South Texas, 95, 97% Hispanic counties. They've been voting for Franklin Roosevelt for 75 years, and they finally realized this is not the Democratic Party they grew up with, and they're shifting to Trump.
And go on, James.
Well, I just say I would not be surprised if some of those non-white voters in the UK who've traditionally voted Labour or left-wing parties also start fraying, and some of them actually backing reform in numbers that we haven't perhaps seen yet.
And that would be a fundamental breaking of the political system in the fact that the politicians have been so late to this, as we said, so late to this issue that actually almost the genie can't be put back in the bottle now. Is there anything that Labour you think can do to turn this around?
Look, if Labour can genuinely stop the votes, then they'll get massive reward for it.
It's 10,000 in, 3 out at the moment so far. So it's
not looking
exactly good. Yeah.
But, you know, same for if Rishi Sunak, when he stood up in 2023 and said, I'm going to stop the votes, if he had he would still be Prime Minister. So there is a potential for results, but it ain't looking like it.
His arms are fairly bound, though, by the European Convention on Human Rights, which he has said he will not leave or not count as leaving. He is a human rights lawyer. You know, we've discussed at length before, and I've, bored on about it before. Is he really the man who loves the human rights sort of infrastructure so much? Is he really the one that can pull the plug on it? You've got the Refugee Convention written for a different age, for a different world, where we were dealing with hundreds of people rather than millions of people moving around. Well, if you were advising Keir Starmer, obviously within those constraints that are on issue, what would he need to do to really have that sort of Donald Trump effect, to follow up the rhetoric with action? What action could he actually take, given we are an island surrounded by water that could very easily, could get tough, could get deporting?
One thing Donald Trump said is that you didn't need new laws, you needed a new president. So I'm not sure how much the Prime Minister can do, but if he can do anything, you stop putting up illegal migrants in hotels and giving them gift cards. You put them in regular detention, where they're basically in jail, but there's a door out. They can always go home, but that is the only way you're going to dissuade people from pouring across the channel, because there's a payoff once they get to Britain.
The El Dorado effect, the golden city on the hill, people come to it. James, on that very note, the government currently announced very out of nowhere that they're going to introduce digital ID cards. Obviously that set off a lot of people. My libertarian instincts deep down, I hate it. But frankly, what options do we have left? The United Kingdom is a hotbed, as America was before, for illegal work. If you don't shut out that illegal black market where people can cross a border and disappear into the black economy, what can you do? And do you think ID cards, A, will work, and B, will there be public consent for them?
Well, I think, as far as I can tell, and people on the left have said this, that actually this kind of already exists in the form of e-visas. So it doesn't actually have much
impact.
Prints,
you get your printer, except if you arrive on a boat, you could disappear quite quickly.
Right. So I think Labour have looked at the polling, right, and they've said the way that we get support for this digital IDs policy is by linking it to immigration, because people are concerned about immigration. I think what they're really doing it for is that they see, perhaps rightly, huge benefits in terms of public service reform and people being able to have one, linked ID across all of these different services. But that is a very different argument, and they're not going out and selling that argument in the way that, for example, Tony Blair, who's been pushing this policy for 20 years, our new Gaza president,
well, indeed, all hail the king of the globalists. Yeah.
He's been making that argument in quite an honest way. Yeah. I'm not sure that Keir Starmer and the government have. In terms of public concern, look, I think people are more relaxed about this kind of thing than they were 15 years ago.
Exactly my next question. It's not the same great big brother centralised database of incompetent government IT projects where they lose all the data. It's on our phones already. Everyone
knows that they've already given all their data to whether it's Facebook or Twitter, and they know that the government can access all this stuff anyway.
Everyone,
and people are uploading their personal information to AI every day. I'm not sure people are as concerned, but it's a classic example, isn't it? When this issue was polled 2 weeks ago, about 70% of people backed it.
Right.
When this policy was polled last week, with the name Keir Starmer attached to it, it dropped to 42%.
Superb.
So,
he is officially now a drag on the ticket.
He may well be.
You've been doing some other polling, James, about President Trump and British and Western views of the president. From where I'm sitting, it looks like, agree with him or not, love him or hate him, he's quite funny. But, he is moving fast and breaking things. He's getting stuff done. He put stuff in his manifesto and then he's delivered on them. How's that landing around the world?
Well, we asked Brits what their biggest strength was of America and America's biggest weakness. And one of the top answers for both was Donald Trump.
Fantastic.
They see him as being someone who is ready to break things, is ready to get things done, but they also think, oh, is his approach costing allies around the world? Is he going to stand by the UK? But there's absolutely no doubt that Brits do respect some of the attributes that Trump has. When you poll voters on Trump in the UK, you get quite negative responses. But when you sit down in focus groups or follow-up questions in a survey and dig into underneath that, they say, yeah, I don't like him that much, but I tell you what, he does get things done. I tell you what, he does speak his mind, and that is exactly what they want to see here. So, the name Donald Trump might not be emblazoned across many sort of British living rooms, but on flags, but they do have a feeling of they respect what he stands for.
Mark, we saw that in the election. There was a sort of shy Trump voter. Obviously, James was one of the very few pollsters that called the election correctly.
I thought you were going to say one of the very few shy Trump voters.
Very few shy Trump voters. But two very brief points. Net positive internationally for Trump. Net positive or net negative? And is there a sort of shy Trump voter that kind of likes what he's doing? And so, they might not scream it from the rooftops, but they quite like it.
For the second one, yeah, clearly, obviously. And what that really is the Democrats pushing people away.
Yeah.
There was a cartoon that Elon Musk tweeted where he was standing in the middle and then the left kept moving.
The Overton window.
Yeah, exactly.
Shifts.
And that's what's happening to lots of people. And it's not just immigration, it's the trans issue and everything else. As far as overseas, Americans don't really care, honestly.
All right, good stuff. James, Mark, thank you for joining us. Fascinating conversation. Don't go anywhere. We're going to pick up all of that and much, much more right after this break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Harry Cole Saves the West. Chaos in here in Washington tonight. Lawmakers in the White House locked in high-stakes fight over spending, threatening government shutdown. A shutdown? I don't know what that is, but a government shutdown. The nation watches on as essentially services hang in the balance. Is it a political bum fight, or is it the end of normal governing as we know it? Joining us tonight on our panel, we have two heavyweights on messaging and crisis, Diana London, who is a comms pro, and Robin Byro, an ex-Obama campaign chief and Army Ranger veteran. Diana, Robin, welcome. Look, I'm going to throw my hands up open on this one. My knowledge of government shutdowns extends mostly to watching The West Wing and wondering what the hell is going on. To Diana first, talk us through what is going on, how have we got to this far down the line, and is this just the usual political game playing by the two main parties?
Yeah, well, I think actually it's both. So, I mean, government shutdowns are a real thing. If the governing parties cannot come to an agreement on the president's plan, then they're going to shut down the government. But I do think that it's always been the big boogeyman that each side kind of uses to mess with the American psyche on the government and funding. I'm going to be quite honest with you. I am very sick and tired of the politics that comes into our government and how we play with the shutdowns. The people of the United States overwhelmingly elected our president, and they support his agenda. And I'm going to say something a little bit controversial, but I think that if we can't come to an agreement, then shut the government down and let's go in and have some hard conversations. And if it takes shutting it down to make a point that the president is doing what's right for our country and he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants, what the American people have said that they wanted, then the Democrats are going to need to come to the table and accept that.
With your crisis comms hat on, though, that's going to be a punchy one to explain to people why they're not getting paid, why their public services are shutting down, and various other bits of their lives grind to a halt, right? I'm still waiting for my social security number. I've been here for months.
Yeah, well, listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't actually think that the American people really care about what happens in Washington, D.C. regarding the shutdown. I think that they care about the economy. I think they care about safety. I think they care about the American people getting what they are supposed to be getting. I don't think we need to be funding illegal immigrants and all of these programs that really do nothing for the American people. And so I'm hopeful that we can, obviously we want the government to stay open, but I'm tired of each side leveraging that boogeyman to mess with the American people's emotion on, making a deal. So I think we're going to see it stay open. I think the Democrats are going to come to the table because ultimately I think this is actually an L for them, not for the president. So yeah.
Robin, you work for the Obama administration. The Democrats are going to have to own this shutdown if they push on with it and go ahead with it. Is that good news for them, or how's the Democratic leadership on the Hill going to effectively tool up and use this as a measure in their campaign against Donald Trump?
You know, one thing that I struggle with my party, the Democratic Party, is that we just are no good at messaging. So even though Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the executive, this shutdown will be pinned on our shoulders because we have people like Chuck Schumer dilly-dallying, saying that it's about health care, when the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, already said that about 900,000 people are on the medical rolls that shouldn't be on there. Sure, there's 16 million people that may risk losing coverage, but there are almost 100,000 of them that shouldn't be on there anyways. So we do need to have a look at these things. You know, my party, we could really suffer in the midterms because, like I said, we're just not good at messaging. And I really don't see anybody out there. You know, Republicans are pretty masterful at messaging. They're saying that this is the Democrats' fault, and I don't see my party saying anything to the contrary other than, but health care for non-citizens. That's a non-starter. I mean, that's not popular with anybody in our country. Maybe the most minute segment of the population, but I mean, you're talking about a 95% unpopularity rating probably for healthcare for non-residents.
Yeah, Robin, look, it strikes me that the Democrats are still kind of punch drunk from last November. They're still sort of reeling around with their fingers in their ears, trying to work out what the hell happened to them there. We've got Kamala Harris on her sort of, masochism apology, tour, taking down a load of her rivals. This does feel like, though, this is the first time the Democrats have got back on the pitch on the Hill, really, since January, in actually forcing an issue. Obviously, they don't naturally have a sort of leadership emerging yet. Is this going to help them, though, get back, get their ducks in a row, get back to sort of focusing on those midterms in 26, or have they picked the wrong battle?
As my co-panelist here said, nobody wants a government shutdown. Government shutdowns are deeply unpopular with the American public, the voting electorate. So we've got to move past this, and I feel pretty strongly, like her, that we're going to move past this some way, whether we have a clean spending resolution or not. My party has deeply entrenched that health care must be addressed. I suspect that we will address it in some fashion, but not in a way that is going to allow for 16 million people to have coverage, including people who are non-residents. So we have to concede something, and hopefully some people with some good common sense. Well, so we need voices with some common sense out there saying something that just makes sense to average American voters, because the party is sort of coalescing around a message here, but it's been so long. I mean, it's been almost a year of flailing with pretty much no leadership. That the messages that I still get are from Nancy Pelosi almost every single day. And we need new leadership.
Diane, I suspect you're on the other side of the aisle, but is there anyone there from the Democrats world that's worrying you yet? I mean, obviously Mandami is emerging in New York as a sort of great socialist hope of the left. AOC is sort of flirting with that sort of vote. But in terms of actually landing blows and closing the gaps on the economy, on healthcare, on immigration, is there anyone yet that's worrying you from the Democrat side?
Oh, I'm going to be honest with you. I have no hope for the current Democrat Party right now and the leadership that they've put up. They clearly have not learned from this last election about what the American people care about. That's the economy, that's ending forever wars, that's America first, that's building our own homeland and bringing opportunities back here. And I don't understand what the Democrats are doing. Why are you ushering forward blatant communist who, I mean, listen to what Mandani stands for. There's not one thing.
Abolishing billionaires, I think, was one of them. He wouldn't criticize Hamas this week when asked directly to do that. We've seen in Britain how it goes when you try to nationalise various things. He wants to sort of have nationalised grocery shops. This is a gift. This is a gift the Republicans. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why you see Chuck Schumer not endorsing it. They're talking, they're communicating, because he knows that he will automatically become the front person of their party. This is my hope for the Democrat Party. Wake up. come back to the center, join us. Let's restore our country, and let's stop driving our country so far to the left that really there's no turn back if you continue that.
Robin, we saw in Britain what happened when a left-wing party, well, centre-left party, lost a major election and then pivoted to the hard left with Jeremy Corbyn. They essentially lost their control of the Labour Party for a decade. And it took a very, very long time for them to recover. Does it worry you when you see President Obama, former President Obama, leaning into Mandami and sort of giving him sort of almost tacit endorsement? I thought it was very striking that Harris wouldn't say his name. He would just say, I support the Democratic candidate. Is there a split in the Dems on what to do? How do you solve a problem like the crazy socialist?
Yeah, we talk about that every day in party leadership. I still am involved in party leadership. And pretty much the message that I can say universally is that we need to go more left. And that just doesn't work. And I'm speaking to you from Atlanta, Georgia. Georgia is obviously a purple state, more so on the red side, if you ask me personally, from a boots on the ground perspective. But those messages aren't going to resonate. I mean, we lost every single swing state, all 7 of them. We lost them all. We're not going to regain any ground roads here by going further left, and especially into democratic socialist land. What works in New York City cannot be used as a model to take across the country, especially to places like the 7 swing states. It's a recipe for failure.
You say you're talking to the leadership about that. Do they get that, or are we suddenly in the run-up to November going to see, sort of people putting their heads above the parapet and endorsing this guy?
They will endorse him. They're not getting it. The message that I keep getting told is, in fact, let me share this little anecdotal bit of information. When I say that we need to focus on common sense issues that are important to the majority of Americans, 80% of them, they tell me that I'm from the old school Obama era and that I need to get with it and become a democratic socialist. So that's deeply concerning.
No, yeah, exactly. You seem pretty well. Diana, let's just move on quickly. We're running out of time, and I do want to touch on the remarkable scenes. I've hot-footed it straight from the White House to here, where we saw yet another peace deal emerging from the President of Peace. Some of those 7 wars he claims that were stopped weren't necessarily wars in the first place, but sort of conflicts and things. Obviously, the testiest 2 are the Ukraine conflict and the situation in Gaza. We saw a lot of fireworks and movement in Alaska and noise around Ukraine. Are we in danger of falling into a similar trap tonight with this much heralded, highly controversial peace deal about Gaza? And if Hamas doesn't come to the table, then we're stuck at square one again, aren't we, Diana?
I want to congratulate the president, though, because I know this president, and Donald Trump is truly the president of peace, and he never wants forever wars, and he doesn't like conflict. And so I believe that really that man is focused on ending this war. It is a very contentious time, I believe, for Israel right now. Israel came out of the gate where the momentum was on their side, and it's really changed because people are seeing what's happening in Gaza. And so I think at this point Netanyahu knows that he needs to come to the table. They need to have the solution, because I think they're losing the PR war on Israel, and the president understands that too. He's getting a lot of pressure. But at the end of the day, when his first term, all the peace deals that he negotiated and the Abraham Accord, it was a great success in the Middle East. I remember traveling over there afterwards, and you just felt like this new power was happening and of peace over there. And now I think he wants to get back to that. And so I'm hopeful that this is the first step. We'll see what Hamas does. Hopefully they'll do the right thing.
I thought it was fascinating with your comms hat on. I thought it was fascinating. The first time I've ever seen Donald Trump not take questions at a press conference, well, apart from in Alaska as well. But he said to PM Netanyahu, I think we should, things are, I think we should not take questions today. That would imply to me, and with your expert hat on, if you were advising them, that would imply that the deal is pretty shaky right now. They've publicly published 20-point terms, but there's clearly some concern that one wrong sentence said from a White House dining room microphone could upset the whole apple cart.
Yeah, well, we know the president loves to take questions. That's one thing we love about President Trump. But
He's certainly transparent.
Yes, he is. But what I saw him do today was he did open it up for questions, and he said to President, Prime Minister Netanyahu, "Would you like to take a question from a very friendly Israeli reporter?"
Yeah.
And then he said, "I think right now we need to flush some more details out before we start doing it." So I think right now we are at the beginning. Everybody is at the table.
Yeah.
As you know, the famous saying is that as long as we're talking, then peace will happen. So we're talking, and that's
well,
good.
over to the terrorists now. Robin, look, if he gets this over the line, if he brings peace to the Middle East, surely President Trump deserves that Nobel Peace Prize, and the Democrats will clap him along the way.
Hey, Hillary Clinton said she would nominate him for one if that were to happen. Now, do I believe that? No, I don't see her doing that. But I'm telling you, I fought for 10 years as a U.S. Army Ranger. And that was a 21-year war that we did with OIF and OEF, and it's just no good. I mean, it might benefit you could argue that it could benefit the economy in some ways. But
all right,
no,
Robin, Diana, I'm afraid we're out of time. That's all we've got time for on Save the West tonight. Good night. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. See you tomorrow.